One of the most intriguing insects is the dragonfly, a remarkable creature with four wings. According to paleontologists, its distant relatives, known as griffin flies, roamed the earth around 300 million years ago and had wingspans of up to 70 centimeters or 28 inches. These facts alone are very inspiring for a build, but it wasn't until I found a broken vacuum cleaner that I saw a dragonfly hidden within its shapes. This is going to be a long journey. Welcome to Cut, Transform Glue, and welcome to the Dragonfly project. Okay, so of course the first thing I had to do was to take the vacuum cleaner apart and see what parts were going to be actually useful for this project. Now, from the start, I knew this was going to be a nasty process, so I was constantly cleaning the parts, but it was what I found later inside it that kinda shocked me. Yeah, I guess this is the reason it stopped working. No big deal though, just some heavy cleaning, and these pieces will be very useful for this project. But you guys know me, before I do anything I like to just grab my hot glue gun and do some tests of volumes and shapes, so this is what I did next. I removed the handle, which I thought looked kinda weird, and on its place I glued the part that was actually on the front of the vacuum cleaner. Then I grabbed a couple of pieces from my broken TV that kinda looked like some air intakes and tested them on the body of the dragonfly. And speaking of a dragonfly, I had to make a couple of big eyes that will actually be the cockpits of this flying thing, and of course, 4 giant wings. And this is the idea, the look and the size I'm going for. This is going to be a long journey, the biggest project I've ever worked on for sure, and it can almost not fit on my work desk. And before we go anywhere, here's a 1:20 human figure so y'all can understand the size of this flying ship, the scale of this build. After this hot glue test, I have a clear idea of the project in my mind and I can finally start to actually build the thing. The first thing I decided to do was to cover the original air vents of the vacuum cleaner, so later I'll add something much cooler than that. As you just saw, I super glued some plastic tabs from the inside covering the holes. From the outside, I decided to use some polyester putty to fill the gaps. This is a nasty, toxic, and bad smelling material, but the good thing about it is that it sets super fast. Also, if you act quick on the first minutes after setting, it has this jelly consistency, so it is very easy to cut with a knife. Once it fully sets though, it gets rock hard and can be sanded. I'll make the newer air vents later in the project, but I had to work on that first before I glued the body shut. Then I made some changes on the front piece, which was made of a much harder material. It is way easier to sand, but also a lot more brittle. You can tell by all of the cracks you already have. I filled the gap on the body with tape and glued the parts together with super glue. And to be sure these are not breaking apart later, I added a couple of small screws. These will of course have to be hidden later. Now, one of the challenges of this build I can already tell is the weight of the wings. So to make sure I can take care of that in the future, I already included a couple of M5 nuts on the top of the body. I think this will be strong enough for the job. Now, this project is full of crazy compound curves and shapes I normally wouldn't work with. Gluing the parts aligned in that scenario can be challenging, so I'm constantly measuring and marking the surface of the model. A nice trick to make the parts match each other is to use double-sided tape to attach sandpaper to the surface and use that to sand the next piece. And then, of course, do your best to glue the pieces together as aligned as possible. And I did the same thing to the back, to the tail of the Dragonfly. I'll for sure think of a ton of things I want to add to the project and it will definitely get heavier. I'm using screws and precise 3D printed parts to join the shape together. Future me will be thankful. And speaking of heavy things, here's something I made in this build that I should probably do on all future projects. Handling big or complex builds is challenging, and I spend a lot of time just dealing with all of the pieces of a project. So for this one, I made a custom 3D printed piece with a big nut embedded on it. I then of course attached a bolt to a piece of wood and now I can just screw the whole project to that heavy base. It's easier to handle, to check the looks, to take pictures, an overall very useful idea. From there I already went for the first coat of primer. A project like this one, full of weird curves and shapes, can be confusing, especially with transparent parts. After the primer was set, I grabbed a marker and drew some lines on it, trying to find where to go next, figuring out the next shapes by drawing. And this worked super well, as it was the model was looking very empty and I felt insecure about adding more things to it, but the panel lines made everything start to make some sense. A couple of cool tricks I can share with you from this process is to first use some thin styrene with some double-sided tape to be able to precisely trace or even cut the lines on curved surfaces. And you can also use the sharp end of a caliper as a compass to also mark or cut some precise round panels. You just gotta make a tiny hole with a pin vise first. When I felt I had a good amount of panel lines traced, I grabbed an X-Acto knife and began retracing them. This would act as a guideline for the nail salon tools, which I use to make the panel lines deeper. I'll try to include some Amazon links to similar tools on the description. I cannot guarantee those will work, but you can definitely try it. Then I finally hid some of the screws I used to keep everything together and cover the air intakes with some custom 3D printed pieces, making them not air intakes anymore, of course. For the pieces on the back, on the tail of the ship, I went with some fake Lego pieces, a nice and easy way to make some reliable attachment points. These round shapes will be like a couple of turbines and make the whole thing kinda look like a chopper, though I'm planning on adding an extra tail growing back from that point, of course later on the project. But it is always a good idea to take care of most of the attachment points early on a build, so later you can just worry about making it look cool rather than facing structural challenges, something that I've learned over the years. And this is how it is looking so far. And of course, you can always compare it to the human figure to have an idea of how big this ship is going to be. I'm very happy with how it is going. I think the panel lines really helped me figuring out where to go next. But this is just the beginning of a long journey. So leave me a comment, tell me what you think, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and please, I need your help to keep going, and the best way to support me is on Patreon. Check the link below and join all of these amazing people, and as always, thanks for watching.